To order the meeting of the Municipal Building Commission of July 27th, 2022. For the record, we don't have to call the roll because we don't have anyone appearing virtually. And we do have a quorum, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 members out of 9. So that's good. So the only order of business for tonight is to interview 4 potential candidates for the feasibility study for the Council on Aging building. And it looks like that's Joe. Mm-hmm. Joe, you can come up and sit in one of these chairs if you'd like. Do we expect anyone else from your board?
No.
I know we have a couple of members probably.
Here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly.
Okay. So
I thought there were 3 or 4 of us.
So the first candidate for the evening is called Abacus. So why don't you come forward? Why don't you introduce yourself? What we like to do is give you about 20 minutes to tell us why we should hire you.
Okay.
Reserve about 10 minutes for questions. And just so you know, we're going to finish around 8 o'clock tonight. We will then decide who to recommend to the mayor that we hire. If you call Jeremy tomorrow, you can find out where you finished in the pecking order, 1, 2, 3, or 4.
I will email you.
And so you have the floor.
And we just ask that whoever's speaking, please stay at the podium. That captures you on both the mic and the camera. So whoever's talking at the podium.
Okay, thank you. So
Keep your voice up because some of us are elderly.
So thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is David Eisen, principal at Abacus Architects and Planners. My partner, David Pollock, also a principal, and Lance Hill with PAR Corporation, civil engineer, site engineer, environmental engineers. And there would be someone else from our team here, and I will get to that in just a minute. So, why Abacus? That's a really good question, and I'm going to answer it in a number of different ways, starting with this. And you can barely see those pictures, but those are not pictures of our buildings. Those are not pictures of your beautiful downtown. Those are pictures of the people who will use this facility, and not a day goes by that I don't say to somebody in our office, it's not about us. It's not even about the buildings, it's about the people who are going to use them, and we're constantly reminding ourselves that that's what's really important. Of course, it is about us because the team you pick really matters. So with us, you get David Pollock and David Eisen, and probably mostly one rather than the other, but we're both involved with every project. The buck stops with the principals. We're at every important meeting. We're in every important Zoom or phone call. We are a small firm, big enough to get the job done, but small enough. This would be an important job for us, and with direct principal involvement. So Julia was going to be here, Julia Patton, except she is recovering from COVID. Annie was going to be here. She's coming down with COVID. So these are project managers with nearly a decade of experience each with projects a lot like this, working with cities and towns throughout the area on community centers and Council on Aging. So this is a reason to hire us. Effective community engagement. A standard line we use is we are experts on architecture and planning. You are experts on Attleboro. So this is the partnership between us and you, the you being the people here, and the you being the COA, and the you being whoever is important to bring into the project. So over the years, we don't just sit down, okay, tell us what you're looking for. We have ways. A Survey Monkey on the lower right, we show all kinds of images what the COA could be. We have people talk about whether they like it or not. On the upper right, Post-it notes. Tell us in 12 words what's really important to you. We organize them. And on the upper left, what you could call a charrette, there's a site model. big public meeting, blue blocks of foam, let's play out different options. These are the kinds of ways we reach out to people to find out what you need and want. We got to hear from you. But we are experts on architecture and planning. We've done a whole series of COA. We're doing, a whole bunch of feasibility studies. So this is like where we're going on this right now. So this is town of Orleans. On the bottom, you can see there are 6 programs we distilled out of the information we got at a series of public meetings and investigations. Small, medium, and large. This is also a recreation center. So small, medium, and large with and without a COA. So those numbers seems pretty simple. Rooms, sizes, they're based on looking at schedules, past, future, programs, and uncertainties, which is why there are a series of options. But then that's just a bunch of numbers. Up above are plans reflecting those. So we walked through, and I'm using this not because you care about Orleans, but this illustrates the way we would approach a project here. We bring these numbers to life with a series of different plans, small, medium, large. All of these are based on the idea of a town green. I mean, it's a building, but there are a series of activity spaces around central common space, because people come for the jazzercise, but they stick around to hang out with their friends if there's a great place to hang out with their friends. And that's what this is all about. So this is without a site, and this is part of what you're asking us to do. Public engagement, develop program options numerically, and then how do they play out in space. But buildings have to go somewhere. They're designed from the inside out, they're designed from the outside in. So there's sites in the center of town, there's sites on the edge of town, there are big sites, there are small sites. In most every town we work in, there are a series of different options and trade-offs. Smaller sites in the center of town, walkable distance from town hall and everybody else. Hey, you got more space if you're outside the center of town, but everybody's got to drive. Better, worse? We bring up the questions. It's really important to bring up the questions because the answers have to come from you, but framed with a series of pros and cons and trade-offs. So I just showed you Orleans. So this is Orleans. Looks completely different from those other plans. Here's a real site. So instead of organizing the plans around a town green, all of those rooms are organized along a street. So town green model, street model, they go back hundreds of years in New England and thousands of years in cities and towns. This is how you bring people together. So we're really open-minded, and we can transform ideas as we begin to fit them on real sites, which is an essential component. We understand, Orleans, really hard to find a site. We understand there are town-owned sites. That's great. So start bringing together the internal life with what's going on outside. So when it comes to site, we look at it from an architecture and a design perspective, but there are all kinds of constraints and opportunities that have to do with engineering and zoning and wetlands, and Lance is going to talk about that.
The people who just came in, if you want to grab a chair and come up there so you can see, we'd be happy to have you participate by being able to see and hear. Go ahead, Lance.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you, David, for the introduction. And staying with the theme of why this team here, I wanted to highlight who would be working on this from our perspective. As civil engineers, we've really built our practice around supporting these types of projects for municipalities and helping them make the best decisions possible for each. Of course, there's me on there, and I apologize for that picture you have to see there. But we have a team of 130 different types of professionals, ranging from civil engineering to wetlands and permitting. Sarah, who is our fantastic mapper, and Kyle and Tim Thompson handle our traffic. What's important about this team here, too, is that not only are we experts in the field, but we're experts in the city of Attleboro. Tim and Kyle are both residents here in the city, so not only do they understand traffic and all the technical data that goes into it, they understand it from a reality perspective, too, and understand really what makes the city tick. And lastly, I'll say I've got a lot of extensive experience here in the city as well, having formerly served as a public works director in the city. I know it about as well as any engineer could know the city. And that's really important when it comes to selecting a site, understanding the character of the city that's around there, understanding what's important about the existing facility that you have there, understanding that, you know, there's some strange roadways that are one-ways all throughout a city. You know, things you can't pick up from just a traffic study or some data tubes that you put down. Actually understanding it and knowing it is really important. Understanding some of the events that occur in a city. The Festival of Lights at La Salette, of course. And understanding some weird character things, you know, like small bridges and other impediments to crossing the city. But also understanding that a lot of work has been done in the city, you know, already. A lot of really good work. Traffic studies, there's mobility studies, downtown studies. Understanding that that exists is only part of it. Understanding how it fits in and how we can help you guys make a decision on where to site a facility, I think is extremely important. We take all of this information, and our role here is to provide it in a digestible, easy to read format so that you can understand exactly what you're dealing with here, so that you can make some decisions really easy. This happens to be a site that we worked on with Abacus here in Middleton, understanding what the constraints are on a property, from its wetlands and conservation restrictions, topography, how the utilities work, what the zoning looks like. This happens to be a former municipal golf course that they were looking to turn into both a town hall and a senior living facility here. But this is the type of things that we provide to the Abacus team so that we can really help finalize that report and make it really easy to make some decisions.
Thank you. So one reason to hire Abacus is we're never afraid to admit when we've made a mistake. This is a city, and I swore I would not say town, but my partner said I said town several times, so by mistake. So the city of Attleboro. So accurate projection of development costs. We have a really good cost estimator on board, but one reason to hire us is we don't just do the work and plug it in and send it to the cost estimator. Right from the very beginning, we're focused not on doing feasibility studies, but on getting buildings built. We always have that mentality, and we always remember that if we don't keep costs under control, then buildings aren't going to be built. You lose the confidence. So again, some of this is firm culture, something to remind ourselves of. It's not just going through the steps and putting it on the shelf. It is getting it built, and accurate cost estimating is a key part of that effort. And these are just pictures of some of the relevant buildings that we've gotten built. That's not the end product for this particular project, but for you, for the COA, absolutely. You don't want just 8.5 by 11 papers at the end of the decade. Complete implementation plan for development of a COA. Again, one of the things that distinguishes us is not just doing the work, but laying out step by step what we've done, some of the questions that were asked, what the process was, what the conclusions were, and then kind of packaging it up so it tells a really good story. This is Town of Lincoln. We looked at 6 different sites. You can see only 3 of them because we couldn't squeeze all 6 of them on there. Methodically went through the pros and cons, we developed the programs, and we gave the town, and when they ended up funding it, a complete story that essentially asked all the questions that people asked along the way. And we showed up at meetings, and we prepared graphics, because that implementation plan is a key thing. And some people just start at the executive summary and go to the conclusion. But the case needs to be made for the COA, or you're unlikely to get it. It costs a lot of money, and people are becoming more and more skeptical about how that money is spent. And we never forget that. Again, one more reason to hire Abacus. And creating a sense of community. This is the ultimate goal. And I said, the buildings don't matter, the architecture doesn't matter, it's the people that matter. The reason we went into architecture is that we believe that beautiful architecture, welcoming architecture, is good for people. It brings people together, connects them with each other, it connects them with the outside world. That is the goal of all of this, and this is what we deliver. And we could have probably 50 other images like this of spaces that people tell us are inspiring, that people tell us they want to come to. And we don't go into any project with the idea, oh, we're going to win awards. That's too much about us. But we've gotten a lot of recognition for the work we've done for cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth on community facilities because, first of all, we got them built. We did the cost estimating, we did the cost engineering because they were beautiful places and those have been recognized. And that's not the recognition we're after. What we're really after is the recognition from you, from the town, from the people who are going to utilize the building. And that's why we do what we do. And it starts at the top and it works its way down through our firm culture, and you'll hear Julie and Annie saying exactly the same thing and following through on those promises. So that's the formal presentation, actually a couple minutes ahead of schedule.
Okay. I have a question then for you.
And Dave, do you want to come up too? Okay.
As with all organizations, I suspect that our Council on Aging does certain things very well, could improve on some other things, and doesn't do certain things at all that may be needed either now or in the foreseeable future. We want to design a building that's going to be flexible, that's going to serve the needs. What's your approach to figuring out what we need in our Council on Aging?
Yeah.
Because we probably won't be building another one of these for 50 or 75 years.
Yeah. And so that's an excellent question. So one of the things we do is we use our experience in other towns. If we're not seeing or hearing something here that we're seeing and hearing in other places, we'll bring that up. You haven't talked about a pickleball court. Everybody wants a pickleball court. Should we plan a big room for a pickleball court? Another question we're always asking is the COA. More and more what we're seeing is COAs are connecting up with the library, with recreation. Your COA may or may not want to do that, but are there other things happening in town that could benefit from what's happening in the COA? They could provide, instead of the COA in Orleans, we're going through this. We went to visit a whole series of other community facilities to find out what they were doing right and wrong. We get people to dream, and what we always tell people is put aside what you've got now, or remember what's good about it. What's missing? What do you hear from your friends in the next town over? What are they doing what you would love to do here? So we push on the COA, and I'm assuming there's the committee, but we would assume we would develop a really close working relationship. And again, something we tell our clients, we push on them, they push on us. If we are suggesting things they don't want. And, it's good to have the COA very much involved. It's great to have a committee like this because you bring other points of view. And as architects, we know about planning and design. We need you. COAs know about running a COA, but they need everybody else. So we want an inclusive process. We work really hard to do that.
One of the tools that we bring to bear in programming with working with the Council on Aging is to look very carefully at time and scheduling to reduce spatial redundancy and make a really efficient building. So we'll work starting with, I mean, we have schedules, monthly planners from other councils on aging, which show all the activities, but also where the hot spots are, through the time of day. There's also a lot of variability in terms of the hours of work, that they can be open, the level of operating funding and staff. And so that affects the space as well. If you have more hours, you maybe need less space because you can spread your programming out, but that depends on the municipal budget ongoing. But looking at the scheduling, we can see where we don't need so many multi-purpose programming rooms, which gets to another aspect of the way we look very carefully at programming, which is dedicated purpose rooms and multi-purpose rooms. There are some functions like a craft or a workshop, a room with exercise machines, where it's not multi-purpose. That space is dedicated to that one use, and if it's valuable enough, then you need that square footage and that space specifically for that. But then having the right number of multi-purpose rooms in the right sizes, and these go all the way from the kind of small conference rooms for grievance counseling and medical exams and podiatry, and there are a lot of there's little rooms all the way up to dining for whatever number is right for Attleboro. Some communities want a gathering space that'll seat tables and chairs for 150 or 175 or 200, and so what is that space, and is that one of the spaces that has the soundproof folding divider walls, or is that just the main central space? So we know all of the different program elements, and some of those tools of the Post-it notes or the surveys, or there's all these tools, Jacob's Ladder, where you give 25 different options that people can preference, but they put them in the numerical order in which they prefer them, and then we bring that data back to Council on Aging, the Municipal Building Commission. Trying to get at your question of how do we support those you don't know what you don't know. The Council on Aging doesn't know how to do what it hasn't done before, so we want to make sure to bring all of those opportunities into the conversation.
Yeah, and we could show a picture of a woodworking shop, and the COA may have never considered a woodworking shop, but there may be 50 people at a public meeting and 150 people on SurveyMonkey saying, oh my God, that's exactly what we need. It'll get my husband out of the house or whatever. So, some of this is crunching numbers. It's quantitative, and some is qualitative, which is showing images and seeing if people respond positively. And then there's costs, which is part of the quantitative part. But, get a desire list.
Okay, thank you. Any commission members? Terry?
My concern is how you're looking at the future. Like you were talking about pickleball being popular, but 20 years from now, it may not be popular. So if you're designing a building based on certain classes or certain activities that may not be popular 20, 30 years down the road, where's that flexibility?
Yeah, and if you look at, and I'm going to turn it over, this is sized for pickleball. This is sized for pickleball. It doesn't say pickleball. It says multi-purpose room. And I think we've shown pickleball outline, but if it goes out of style.
No, I just use that as an example, but.
Yeah, but nothing, no, it's a really good point, because pickleball 5 years ago, who'd heard of it 5 years from now? But that's with everything we do. And as David, some rooms are more specialized, some are specialized. The idea is to make it as multi-purpose as possible, so it can be used in all kinds of different ways. So we really always plan for the future. And walls that open and close, maybe you need more big rooms, maybe you need more small rooms. And we're always asking those questions, so flexibility is important because we don't know. Also, being able to do an addition. I mean, you could start with the small version and then add on to the larger version. So we try and do dotted lines and suggest don't get a 1.25 acre site. You'll never be able to expand. Try and, if you can, get a 1.75 acre site and leave some room.
There are two kinds of spaces that require performance floors. There's, the ones that are smaller and more multi-purpose for yoga and Zumba and a lot of other, activities those are pretty flexible, and you can even have meetings like this in them. And then there's gymnasium, which is, it's a big ticket item, and it doesn't usually get fitted into a council on aging, into a senior center. I mean, many communities in Massachusetts actually have a full gym. It doesn't necessarily get that much utilization, but you can put 3 pickleball courts in a basketball gym. It just, we know all the numbers.
Yeah, and we'd like to find out if this is a COA, but what do other facilities provide? Does the city desperately need a place for pickup basketball? It may not be the COA, but that would be good information to have, because conceivably that makes a difference between getting funding or not. So we do the work, we ask the questions and see where it leads.
Ed?
Yeah, what are the emerging practices that you see on the horizon? What are the things that are exciting, that are being accomplished, that are exciting and successful in building a COA?
What are we seeing?
Yeah.
We're seeing, number one, multi-generational, that protecting seniors from younger people is not what they want. People feel patronized. So very often, here, this is all, there's recreation components. So often what we'll have is, if there are facilities not directly related to COA, the COA will have their own area. There may be a little recreation office, and in between are multi-purpose rooms. And you want to protect everyone. You want to protect teenagers from those old people, and you want to protect seniors from the teenagers, but to give people a place to meet. So I would say that's the biggest change we're seeing. And people are more and more, we're also seeing reluctant to admit that they're seniors. Go to a senior center. I'd never go to the senior center. Go to the Center for Active Living. Yeah, I'll be there. So that's a semantic difference, but it's also a programmatic difference. Being isolated, connecting inside to outside. They used to be stick the seniors in the basement with these high windows, isolated from everything. COVID only brought this to the forefront, connecting inside and outside. On a nice day, open up the big garage door. Do the jazzercise outside rather than inside. We rarely hear anybody saying, we don't want that stuff.
So I'll add 2 others. I mean, David mentioned the one that we see most is this reaching down to the younger 50-somethings and 60-somethings and trying to expand, not just serve the older seniors. And then a timeless thing, which isn't a new, but this connection to the outdoors. It's what every public building in New England, any building in New England should have. 2 others are also really focusing on services for the declining seniors, memory cafes, and you can provide an enormous support for families that are dealing with family members with cognitive decline, and just to get a break, drop somebody off for a couple of hours, have those kinds of services provided is really emerging and big. And then last of all, it's paradoxical because it's not the building itself, but outreach services. I mean, in a city of 47,000, you've got a lot of seniors that need services that aren't going to necessarily be coming to the building, but the Council on Aging can serve them very strongly, and that can be rooted in the building. I mean, you can, whether it's sort of food pantry support, having a big library of wheelchairs and walkers and other devices in a rotating loan, and making sure there's storage space for those services. There's a lot that serve the community that needs space that's programmed into the building.
And we're leaving here a couple hundred square feet for storage of medical equipment. There's a sizable population who can't afford it, who wants to hand it down. I don't think, that's relatively new and really important. And just one more thing, confidentiality. There are people who need all kinds of services, and they don't necessarily want their friends to know. So we usually have a counseling office where all your friends are watching you as you walk in the door, really respecting people's needs, which are, there are more and more of them, that they need to protect your privacy, and that kind of sensitivity we hear about all the time.
Anybody else? Jerry?
What is the trend on other jobs that you've done like this as far as locations? Are you finding that they're better served in the center of the city, in town, or on the outskirts?
Yes.
Yes to what?
I think to what you said.
Well, it's both. I mean, we're working with Millis right now, and we just got done with a series. Every 2 weeks, we just did a community forum that were really well attended. Like, the fewest attendees was maybe 50 for meetings, and we had 100 at the biggest. In that case, the Council on Aging is in a converted school, which is the municipal building, the VMB, the Veterans Memorial Building. And most of the seniors don't want to be in the VMB anymore. So there, the sentiment is overwhelmingly for the farm, Cassidy Farm, and to put it, and they want a new building, they want their own building, they don't care about driving. All the talk about walkability across the street from the library, the shops, the cafes, right in the center of town, they're like, yeah, that's all good, but like we actually want our own building. But that has a lot to do with the fact that it's a choice between rehab of the space they're in now and the displacement of having to go through construction and, as opposed to a brand new facility. They want the brand new facility. I think the conversation in Millis would be very different if it was two open sites, one that was walkable and another that was only drivable. Then the advantages of the being in the center is
And if there's
clear.
bus service, I mean, the COA might have their own bus, but if there's municipal bus service, that changes the equation. You don't need to drive, but you don't need to be able to walk.
Yeah, the reason I asked is the city has a piece of property that used to be a former golf course, and they have an existing clubhouse. It's on the outskirts of the city. I don't know if that's too far from the city, or, I mean, it'd be nice. I think it'd be a nice site for it. Kind of a country setting. You got plenty of parking there, but there's no bus service, and you would have to be able to drive there.
And that, if the only other alternative is a site that's 1.25 acres and you need a 2-story COA and it's all squeezed, then that might be the best alternative. If you have a nice site closer to the center of town that's got some space. So it's all comparative, it's all trade-offs, but you've really identified the question we are being confronted with all the time, and we have no opinion. But we can frame the question, we can frame the trade-offs and the pros and cons so that you and whoever has a voice can voice in on this.
The open, expansive site, you can do all the outdoor development with walking paths and parkour for exercise, and you can relatively easily develop those kinds of amenities that may not be offered, and so it's trade-offs.
And what about senior housing? If you have a great big site, you could do senior housing, and there are 50 people who can walk to the COA, and you team up with the developer. So that's something else we're seeing, public-private partnerships. They complicate things a little bit, but if you've got a golf course, what about having senior housing? What about workforce housing? So that the people who work at the senior center can walk 100 yards. So we're not afraid to throw out ideas that people may roll their eyeballs and say,
You guys can shoot them down.
But they are the kinds of issues we encourage people to think about, even if they say no. There are a lot of needs in every town and city, and housing is certainly one of them, and accommodating seniors is another.
We're running up
Running out of time, but-
against time, yeah.
Ed, did you have another question?
Yes. What kind of success have you had with integrating programs at the COA with other programs in the city, like the high school, a vocational program, the library? What kind of outreach has been successful, and would you promote?
Well, we do, like in Orleans, we are in ongoing discussions with the library and the middle school to not duplicate, and the COA, to not duplicate facilities. The library has a big plan, add 30,000 square feet. is that ever going to happen? So the idea is, oh, the library will meet some of these needs, but so the COA and community center don't have to. Will that really happen? So we're in as many discussions as are helpful in tying this down. We've done a number of projects that do, I mentioned housing, that combine senior facilities to with housing. So that's another kind of discussion. We are
We do
completely
need
open and
to wrap
encourage you
things up,
to
but did you have a question,
bring this
Joe?
to the table.
I can ask a quickie. If you do win the bid, when do you think that you'd be able to start, and how long do you expect the project to take place before you come up with a complete feasibility study, roughly?
Usually about 6 months is a reasonable period of time. There's a fair amount of work to do, and there's a fair amount of process to go through. And we can kind of go as fast as you guys want to drive it, and as your community, you feel that your community can absorb it and participate in it. There's seasonal aspects. Sometimes, people aren't available for the community meetings, and people don't, we're going to be done with summer, and so that's not an issue. That often is an issue about transparency and public process. I think site selection and evaluation often can drag things out because, you want to look at the right sites, and if you know what they are and you give them to us, we'll go right to work and evaluate them. But sometimes there's some inquiry, and I think 6 months is a reasonable minimum to get it done. And then we will stay with you as long as it takes. We're working with Medfield on a rec center relocate project, and that was dependent on their replacement of the Dale Street Elementary School, and the voters voted that relocation down. And so it's just, we're still there working with the rec center, even though, and without expanding our contract, even though the time is extended. So it's fast or as slow as you need.
So if you look at our inboxes, you will see very few messages. David, you promised this. Where is it? You're slipping behind. We do not get many of those. You look at our outbox and you see lots of emails saying, we can't really get to the next step unless you provide us this information. So it is very much as dependent on our clients as it is on us, which isn't to say we're not busy, but
All right, so I think we are out of time, so I want to thank you for coming in and making the presentation. We hope to be able to come to a conclusion in a couple of hours, and as I said, give Jeremy a call tomorrow. You can find out how you did.
If I could have 20 more seconds just to make one more reason to hire us, which is that from 2005 to 2013, I served on the Brookline Building Commission, essentially the same seat you guys are in. I resigned that because I got elected to the school committee. I chaired the school committee, served from 2013 to 2019. I currently serve on the advisory committee that advises town meeting, and I chair the land use, zoning, and sustainability subcommittee of the town's advisory committee. It's a town, but it's got 63,000 residents. So I not only know what our job is, but I intimately kind of understand and know what your job is, and we bring that knowledge to our work.
we sit in your seats and we know that there's a weight on your shoulders.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
This is the one that didn't know Mr. Stahl.
Oh, it says in the RFQ it's 9 months, 270 days.
Can I leave these with you?
Leave them with Jeremy, and we'll hand them out.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Yeah, I know.
I think a bus is going. We were having a plumbing problem last week. Isn't it central? They come to get resolved. Well, yeah, but last week they were. Oh, I know. It has a plumbing issue.
Is that anything?
I don't know what it is. Just never had a plumbing problem. I had to close.
Jeremy, they left
Jermaine
things to
Thomas.
hand out, and Joel has some things to handle.
How are you? And there isn't it. High country club.
We made extras, and it might be one short. No, no.
Thank you.
Want to pass the others down the aisle? Hand them, so you can take one.
Engineering, environmental.
You're saying, you gotta look at now.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Hey, you have the floor. And even though many of us know you, you can introduce yourself again.
Great, I will.
And answer the most basic question, which is why should we hire your firm for this project? Hopefully in about 20 minutes of your presentation, about 10 minutes of our questions, we can move on to the next candidate. We are interviewing 4 tonight. You are number 2.
Okay, well, thank you. My name is Joel Bargmann. I'm a principal at BH+A, and it's great to see a number of you that, as you may recall, we did interview here about 5 or 6 years ago for another project. Happy to be here. We know you haven't selected the different sites, but the job is to look at the entire community, whether it be downtown. I know that's not preferred, but who knows, and where you end up with on these site studies. The reason that we're here tonight is we specialize in senior centers. Over the last several years, we've done Sandwich, Falmouth, Situate, we have Newton in design, Sudbury, Jeremy's doing construction right now. We have several in planning and design. The team is on the right from our office. Rachel's not here because she will come in when we get to the design phase. She'll also be allowed in the community outreach. But tonight we're talking about how do you take something that's highly emotional, where should the senior center go, how big is it, and try to turn that into a very methodical, data-driven project that's supportable and votable by City Council. So we're going to walk you through 5 steps, starting with what to build, how much will it cost, where to build it. But the 2 important things are defining the building, Jeremy will talk about that, and then analyzing the sites, and Lance and I will talk about that. Defining the building is, we may look at 5, 6, 7 different sites, and each site may have a different building. So we need to come up with a footprint, or maybe multiple footprints, but we're not going to ask you to fall in love with the senior center in this phase, because we're looking at so many different sites. There may be 3 or 4 very different 2-story schemes, 1-story schemes, who knows what. But we'll learn a lot about what you like out of this process, and then the final design really fleshes that out. I love these UMass reports, these need assessment that you have. It's very much in line with the 5 foundations that we have for our senior centers. And the number 1 thing that they request in your surveys, fitness programming. Number 2, intellectually stimulation. Sort of harder to quantify, social engagement, information delivery. We know, I walked through your existing senior center and saw how big the SHINE, the insurance program is. You're a regional office. That's a very different program for a council on aging than our typical ones. And last, they mentioned it in here as volunteering. Volunteering isn't free. You have to train your volunteers. You have to tell them when you have to schedule them. It takes some work on your staff to get through that volunteering. So let me turn it over to Jeremy, talk about what you build so we can get a footprint for your different sites, and then we'll talk about how we rationalize those different sites.
All right. The process, what to build. I think you know, we're really trying to determine the right size of the building and figure out, you know, how do we do that, what's included. The first step is to analyze, you know, what your current programming is. We've got the newsletter, we've gone through that. And then, you know, factor in future wants and needs, kind of wish list programming, and how do we make those fit into the new building, work with what you already have, update things as needed, that sort of thing. And then from there, we're looking at the spaces themselves. We know from previous experience that there's no one solution for every community. Every community is going to have unique wants, needs. For example, we got the top middle, we have a winter greenhouse, and that was for the town of Randolph. That was a specific thing that the community wanted, you know, in there, but it's not something we typically do. But, you know, in talking to the community and figuring out what the wants and needs are, we can determine if something, a very specialized place like that is needed, or several of those, or if we want more, you know, flexible sites like the middle, bottom, that kind of thing. Exactly what is needed for your community, not, you know, what works in others. And then we have different types of those spaces. So some are flexible, some are purpose-built. On the top right, we have a pool room that's very purpose-built for that one function. Those are great. They have a lot of character, but, you know, if you have too many of those, it tends to get big, right? So we want to strike a balance between those and, you know, kind of a more flexible rooms that can have several different uses throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, you know, as needed. And from there, we go to support spaces and how do we make those more flexible if needed. So on the left, we have a commercial kitchen, kind of typical for senior centers, that'll serve a large meal, a large event, that type of thing. But on the right, we have a kitchen that we've included in other senior centers that we've done that has the space in the center there, which is used for cooking classes, which we know are becoming more and more popular in different communities. And then again, determining what the seniors here would want between one or the other. And then again, another right sizing the circulation spaces and some of the gathering spaces. So we need to have larger spaces for people that'll be in wheelchairs, walkers, that kind of thing, but we don't want it to get so big that it becomes unwieldy and kind of a waste of space. And we want the gathering spaces to be large enough to have, you know, a nice gathering, but still be intimate, right? So just determining what the right size of every space, which will give you the right size of a building. And then we have flexibility as far as serving the entire senior population. I think we know that a 60-year-old senior has different abilities, different wants, different needs than a 90-year-old senior. I think the UMass report stated that getting someone in the 60-year-old ranges into the senior centers can be somewhat difficult. So we want to make sure that the building is flexible enough to serve everyone. And so after we've gone through all that, analyze the data, talk to people, community outreach, we come up with an initial program, which gives us these are the rooms we need. These are the ones that'll be flexible versus, you know, more purpose-built. This is the size we need, and this is where, and from there is where we're going to go. And start looking at the actual building itself, and, you know, the programming in it. So this is an example of something we did for Chatham, where we had to, you know, somewhat convince the town that the building we made and the rooms that we had were necessary. You know, people thought it was too big, too small, etc. So we took all the programming, and that includes some of the programming the seniors wanted that they didn't have enough room for, and determined, you know, where those could go, and show that if we have a large lunch in the multi-purpose room, we're going to need an hour of setup and an hour of breakdown. And, you know, so that room is kind of off limits during those times, but there's still programs that are going to be going on. So we need 2 different program rooms, and those can be flexible for 3-4 different programs throughout the day. And this kind of example is what I was just talking about, to go from a lunch in the morning or in the afternoon to a Zumba class in the later afternoons are going to take an extra hour on either end. I'll turn it back over to Joel.
So with that, I sort of summarize, and it was really interesting how close our goals were to the UMass summary from the community. And I think that, you know, folks in Attleboro, like most communities, want to remain in the community. So our goal is to make it easier for folks to remain in their houses. And in that way, the senior center is a benefit to the entire community. And that's part of our job, is to convince non-seniors that building a really good senior center is a benefit to the entire community. I think one thing that was really popped out, and it's in the report, it's a large number, 13% of the residents were reported to have Alzheimer's or cognitive related issues. That's a pretty high number, so that might range you into some senior care and other type programming, which is becoming very common and something we're spending a tremendous amount of time developing programs in different communities. So I don't want to read all these, but these are really interesting, I think, summaries of where the project would want to go over time. So back to the beginning, you know, would there be a site downtown? Clearly not your existing site, too small. But downtown, you have parking issues, you have sightline issues. The church that you're currently renting has some great spaces at it, great parking, but I understand that they may not be interested in more long-term leasing of their community spaces. The golf course, we understood from the RFP, is one option. That sort of shows a couple things. We often end up with buildings that may have a lot of work to do, that may not be appropriate for the use. We'll look at whether that can be reused or not, or whether that needs to be taken down. But some of the things about the golf course are things that you look for on sites: big opportunities for outdoor space, parking lot that's not confined the way it is in a downtown site. So there's a range of things, and I'm sure there'll be other sites that come up that we would be looking at, and we would be going through a series of criteria. So here's what we want to do, is make it crystal clear that we've created a rational study of each site, treated equally between us and PAR Engineering, that looks at things like, how far is the parking to the building? We like to get parking within 125 feet of the front door. Not everybody's physically disabled, but the physical disabled spots are often used, and someone in a walker may end up having to park on the back side of the lot. So how can we get the parking close to the door? Can we make your slopes in your parking lot accessible and easy to transfer across? What are your parking needs? There's a zoning bylaw requirement for the city of Attleboro. We can extrapolate from the existing use at the church and your existing senior center. We can look at your core peer facilities. We can also use Jeremy's schedule of uses and look at each one of those rooms and say, how many people are now in these rooms? How many cars are bringing those people in? And create an actual number of cars that work for the different sites. And those numbers may be different depending on, Falmouth has a shared parking lot between the community center and the senior center, and thus its need for parking for the senior center was different than when we had the senior center at a high school site. Our traffic engineer will also be looking at the sight lines. Even in a rural location, sometimes there's a bend in the road. It's hard to make a left turn. Seniors don't like to make left turns, particularly at night. Now, science and engineering, let me turn it over to Lance.
Hi, thank you again for letting me have the opportunity to say this. We've been very fortunate to have gotten to work with BH+A on a number of these sites, specifically senior sites. So we have a really good working relationship on know what to expect and how best to cooperate and deliver on time. After we go through, as they're going through their programming portion of it to see how big the building is, oftentimes we're asked to look at a number of different properties throughout there. So what we're really looking to do is, how do you clearly and fairly vet these sites to kind of have an apples to apples comparison as opposed to ranging all over the place. So we will help develop the footprint of the building, and then we start test fitting the sites and say, how does this fit on here? What are the constraints that that site has? What are the impacts to the local community, to the neighborhood, environment? And how is the building going to be oriented? In my former role, I was a municipal official responsible for maintaining some of the buildings. We know that you don't want the entrance on the north side of the building, or you're getting big ice issues there and having to deal with those. And the type of material that you use to fight that ice is going to be tracked throughout the building all the time. That's an ongoing maintenance cost that, we want to try to avoid if we can. So we're looking at all of these type of issues, these technical issues, what the floodplain looks like, what kind of site constraints that are there. And, we often evaluate this is one that we just finished up in the town of Sturbridge here. They gave us multiple sites to take a look at. An existing building, did an evaluation on the existing building and the existing site that it's at. And then we had 2 vacant sites throughout the town. What benefits do each of those provide? All 3 were town-owned sites. We had 2 of the sites were in competition internally. One department wanted to put one type of use on it, another department wanted to put another type of use on it. So we helped try to figure out what is the best use for that site there, which department, sometimes they both come to the table and we have to deal with that as well. While we're doing this, we're looking at, not just the zoning codes that are there, but there's a number of building codes that we're looking at too. When we're evaluating the existing buildings, sometimes special construction comes in that, when you do an alteration of greater than 50%, kicks you to another level. That adds additional cost to existing facilities, whether that be the facility that you're currently in or retrofitting another town-owned building around. And then we start putting conceptual site plans together. What's this going to look like, so we can clearly communicate what's involved and we can clearly get to costs associated with all of these. This is an example of that type of plan that we put together. Same project, 2 different sites. How they fit, what they look like, what opportunities for expansion are there. Can you build in modularity? Can you make the parking lot bigger if you need to, if you grow into the future? How do you plan for that and prepare for that? And then we communicate this as a comparison. How do these sites compare to each other? What makes one better than the other? Each community has a little bit different philosophy on what makes something better or not. Our job is to provide that information and help the team make a collective and informed decision.
Great. Thank you, Lance. The summary that he made gets transferred into a 5-page site data matrix. All of the issues that we've looked at get compiled and answered for each site we've looked at so that each site gets treated the same. What we're trying to do is be completely objective so that someone can't say you favored one site over the other. And what that data matrix allows us to do as a test is to actually rank the sites. So we can go 4, 3, 2, 1, rank the sites on each one of the criteria that we've looked at. And while it's not a definitive solution, it's a way of identifying what site might rise to the top or not. So what we're trying to do again is take something that's subjective and make it objective. So everybody wants to know how much it costs. It's not just the construction costs, but there's all sorts of other costs that go into what the city council needs to fund. We will line them up, site work, building. Is there a field that needs to be replaced because we're putting it on a ball field or some other function that needs to be replaced? What's the cost range? And then what are some of the other cost factors to be thought about? But this is the important line, lining up your projects, data, what works, how much does it cost, and our cost is very accurate. When we go from the feasibility study to final design to construction, we have a very good record of the actual project coming in below what our feasibility studies have budgeted. And one thing is some detractors may say, well, I'm all for this, but we don't want to add staff. So this is an operational budget that we prepared with Falmouth, saying, okay, when I go from a 2,500 square foot to a 15,000 square foot building, what's the impact on our costs for the community? How long does it take? It roughly takes about 6 months. We want to do outreach and programming in the first months. Good time to do it, right after the summer vacations. Do the data collection that Lance talked about, put our cost estimates together, put our report together, put our final reports together, get city comments, get community feedback, and then sometime in the early winter, late winter, February, have a final report. The community feedback's important. Do we do it in small workshops with larger, you can see there's a number of community tables set up for this particular senior center meeting. Here's the one in Randolph that Jeremy mentioned, turned up that very unique program of a greenhouse and a couple other really, a gym as well in Randolph. So there are different ways for us to present to the community, but our job is to take all that data, put it together, and make something that folks can understand and see clearly. And last is, what's your community context? Cohasset wanted their 10,000 square foot senior center to look like a house that was on Main Street. And so we studied the Main Street properties and then picked up color, window trim, ways of adding on to it. Do the same sort of idea in Attleboro. What are your community buildings, the library, the city hall, your other buildings? What's the architecture? What's the vocabulary? What should this building look like that makes it feel like it belongs to Attleboro? So, with that, questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll start just to try to equalize questions across some groups. So to synthesize two questions, how do you think about adaptability in both the physical space and then in programmatic needs? And so how do you build in what the future senior center needs are 15, 20 years from now, or even 5, 10 years from now after the building gets built? And how do you work that into either the feasibility study or what the final report says?
Yeah, so it's really hard to tell what's going to happen in 15 years. Like, who would have thought that pickleball is the fastest growing sport in America, and that we have to build pickleball in Sandwich, Newton, Falmouth, Situate. Never thought of that 10 years ago, but that is a change. I think Jeremy's slide, if you can remember the pool table that was very specific versus the community rooms that were very general. I think you want to have a balance. You can't have everything be so flexible that it has no character and people don't love it, but you can't have it be so character driven that it's not adaptable in the future. Some of the ways that we've done adaptation is, oddly enough, a lot of senior centers are 2 stories these days for a number of reasons. In Needham, we have a 2,000 square foot outdoor deck that can be added onto in the future to adapt that program. That's sort of a common, Sturbridge has a similar idea that we build in areas for these buildings to adapt effectively in the future.
And how do you think of how do you think of and how do you get other people's thoughts on the trade-offs between a more urbanized place versus a one on the outskirts of town? What factors are you playing in terms of the site selection?
Well, I think you have to learn from the community, and I'll tell you that the sites, for the most part, that the community, the seniors love, are not the sites that ultimately get voted on and approved. And example, Falmouth, they were wanting to go on the outskirts of town on a site part of the high school property. School committee couldn't come to grips with having a senior center on school property, so we ended up now with a senior center right in the middle of downtown, which was not their initial idea. At the end of the day, they love it, they're happy to have it, So you have to be flexible and you have to make the best out of it, but I don't think there's a hard and fast rule about, I don't want to sound like I'm in love with the golf course, but it's not usual that you have a site that's that green that's actually that close to downtown. It's not like you have to drive 6 miles to get to the golf course site from City Hall. If that parking lot next to the library was larger and you could put a senior center on that, how great would that be for the community? Seniors love going to the library and then going to the Council on Aging building and combining programs next to their combining parking. The huge cost savings in Falmouth was sharing the parking lot between the community center and the senior center. So I don't have a perfect answer for the rural, the out-of-town versus center, but I wouldn't rule out the downtown just per se.
Terry?
Where do you find, like, once you build a new senior center or COA, that there's a lot more participation? Does it bring in more people? So does it increase the attendance and the population?
It increases it at a really phenomenal level. And
So you have to factor that
people
in.
don't believe us when we say that, and then inevitably, you know, they're adding on to the senior centers in 10 years from now. So it's really a big change when you have a new center, and part of it is you can reimagine. You know, Rachel on our team and Jeremy come from the other end of the age group from me. We're trying to bring in the new seniors and the seniors that are already there, and have a program that grows over time and not just puts a dot down in 2022. So it'll grow. You have to design the parking lot to grow, and you have to think about that.
So you have to factor that all in, not do it based on previous data. Is there any historical data or studies done as far as long-term, what they see as the growth?
I mean, I think that we see a 30% growth, but I don't know that there's state study. I haven't seen any state studies that say plan for.
Yeah, you cited one from UMass, right? So I was curious.
Well, you've done the UMass, and we've actually worked with them on their long-term plans for all these other communities.
I didn't know if they had actual studies.
Well, they don't have studies, but they give you a demographic, and you can look at the growth in the senior population between today and 2035, and you know that it's going to need to be bigger in 10 or 15 years, just based on the demographic charts that are in this document.
Okay. So you build in that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Ed, did you have a question?
Yes. Looking at your site selection criteria, how big a factor would an existing structure on a site be in that selection as far as the cost, or the overall cost of demolition involved in the existing building?
Right. So, well, demolition's historically it's not that expensive, but Pembroke, we have to take a building down that was a school, and it has hazardous materials in it, so a simple demolition job becomes a little bit more complicated. So it all depends on the age of the building. Does it have asbestos? Is there a leaky oil tank? All those factors that Lance would be identifying in his site study have to be factored in. And it's not always that we take those buildings down. Sometimes we end up reusing them in part or in whole. Sturbridge ended up with not a new renovation of a building, not a new building.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're pretty close to the time.
We are.
Okay. Thank you. If you call Jeremy tomorrow, you'll find out whether you finished the first, second, third, or fourth. We have 2 more to interview tonight, but we do appreciate your time, and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having us. We'd love to work with you and get you a successful senior center approved, so thank you.
Not too soon.
Nah, you have time.
Just like to share with you about programs that we do at your website.
Number 3 is Lero.
Considering huge growth. More building, nice.
Look, there's a clicker up there.
You're welcome.
You have something to hand out?
We just got personal copies. We can pass this around, but I can email these to folks.
Yeah,
we were asked not to.
We were asked not to print
Print
personal
stuff.
copies.
All right, so you are the third of 4 that we're interviewing. And please introduce yourself and answer the most basic question, which is why should we hire you for this feasibility study?
Sure.
We'll expect that you'll have about 20 minutes, and then we'll have about 10 for questions.
Perfect.
Sounds great. Okay. Good evening, I'm John Zikowitz, I'm Senior Vice President of Design at Lero Group.
And I am Chris Passy, and I'm mechanical engineering team.
So thank you for inviting us over here tonight. We originally were founded in 1984. We're a firm formerly known as DeGiorgio Associates. Been around for many years. Our background is healthcare and senior living facilities of all types, nursing home, dementia facilities, independent, assisted. So our background is in healthcare and assisted living. We joined the Lero Group in 2018, and Lero Group has a large focus on public work, and that's how we started getting more into public work, and we found the synergy between the work we've done at senior living and then the kind of the work for council on aging senior centers. We sort of found a nice synergy there. So we started to go after those type of projects on the public work side. We've done many 50-plus senior living facilities, over 5 million square feet of healthcare. We currently have, for our senior center experience, we have 2 council on aging facilities that are currently under construction, and 1 council on aging community center that's in the DDCD phase. So we have 3 projects that we're working on there, but like I said, a lot of experience over the years in senior living facilities. And, you know, we look at senior living facilities, you know, as you, there's the laser. Oops, no, that's not it. Or did I do another laser? Oh, there it is, sorry, wrong button. So, you know, in senior living facilities, you have all the same type of activity spaces. You have, you know, dining rooms and kitchen spaces and pubs and wellness centers, all the same kind of components that you find in a council on aging or a senior center. It's just there's rooms attached to it. So we feel the knowledge we have in designing those senior centers plays well when we start to design a council on aging building. Oops, wrong one. Oh, what am I doing to you? I'm sorry. It's a different, okay, good. So what we do, senior housing, nursing facilities, a lot of, you know, all the different elements you have, you know, public spaces, back of house dining facilities, outdoor spaces. You know, we design our spaces to blend in with the towns that we put them in. We do a lot of research on what sites and what's adjacent to it, what's the historical nature of the town. So we try to blend things in so that they match the structure and history of a town. The open spaces, you know, a lot of daylight we try to gather in, drop-off spaces. So all these components go into a senior facility. Why Lero? We do customized solutions. We haven't done 20, 30 senior centers. We've done a lot of senior living, but not a lot of senior centers. So we're going to customize this to what you want. We're not going to pull something out of a drawer and say, oh, here's one we've done someplace else. We'll just modify it. Here you go. We're going to work with you to get what you need on your property, functions you need. I looked at I read through the executive thing of the executive summary of the community needs assessment. They talk about, you know, the parking and the wellness facilities and classrooms and things like that you need in this new facility. And those are the things that we'll work with and design this building so that it works for you. The majority of our core disciplines are in-house. Chris is in-house mechanical, we have in-house structural, in-house electrical, we have in-house plumbing, thank you.
Fire protection.
Fire protection. We have most of our facilities are
Civil
in-house.
site.
Civil site. We have, between us and our home office in New York, we have a staff of almost 950 people, and we use them as we need to either ramp up on a project. One of the big things that's great about our office is our quality assurance, quality control program, because we have 2 different architectural offices, one in Manhattan and one in Syosset in Long Island, is we trade projects, and when we get to a certain point on a project, they'll send a project up to us, we send the project to them, and they review it with like a fresh eye, so we get a really good level of quality assurance and quality control. And then, like I said, our design experience, our combination of healthcare, senior living, and public work, we feel it plays well when it comes to this type of facility. And the people on our team, everybody on the left there is all Lero in-house. I'm at the top. I'll be the principal in charge, the person you meet with all the time. We have Kimberly, a project manager, and then all the other components, structural, building code, analysis, sustainable people. We have everybody on the left side is under Lero. Then on the right side, we do a lot of work with Meridian Associates. They do a lot of our civil and site design work. CDW does our hazardous materials and environmental stuff. If it's a new site we're going to look at, we want to take a look at those things. And then Geocomp is our geotechnical engineer. Again, if we need to do borings or do things like that on new properties, we can bring them in to help us where we need to on the feasibility report. We do have a local presence here. We designed Christopher Heights. That's like 2 minutes from your senior center. I think I designed that in 99, 2000. It was a design build project with Vinny Cucchiera from Christopher Heights. I don't know if anybody knew Vinny back then, but it was designed, it was a very tight budget. Everything was really scrutinized because he wanted it to come on a certain price point so that he could then market it to a more entry-level renter than most assisted livings cater to. So everything was really detailed down. We instead of having one large dining room, they have a dining room on each floor. So each residential floor has their own dining room with their own small kitchen, and it's a multi-purpose room. So they have a laundry area. So it functions to do a lot of different functions. But so one, it saved the space of a large dining room, and then two, it also solved the problem of bringing people down at night for dining. So they have all their dining on each floor. We have an outdoor space in the back. I think your building is like right there. This building is down now, I noticed when I went by. We'll talk about that later. And then, some of the units inside. So we do have some knowledge of local area. We were able to park down under the building to solve their parking problem. So depending on what site you're looking at, I don't know if that site's available next to you guys. Oh, it isn't? Oh, too bad, because I saw that was from the excavation. It looked like you could do the same thing we did on Christopher Heights, where you could park underneath it. It's too bad, because it looked like a nice site. So we do have a local presence here. So as we were going through your strategic plan, kind of pulled out each one of the goals and then how we would use our design to kind of start to achieve those goals. So the first one, the equitable access, creating a site with a combination of parking and van access. If you don't have enough parking, people are not going to come. That's been true on the three facilities we've worked at so far. This is the one. This one is in Wayland, Mass. That we're working on. We have space for 95 cars, and then the beauty of this site is across the road they have what is they call their town center, which is kind of a shopping restaurant area. So when they have big events, if they can park over and they can use the van to go over and pick people up and bring them in, and they also use the van to go and pick people up at their homes. So that's one way to handle your parking problem. So we want to make sure not only is the parking easily accessible, the building is fully accessible, that it's good for the elders and families. We want to create both public and private interaction spaces when you get inside. Sometimes you want to have group functions. Sometimes people are coming in for maybe help with their taxes, or they're chasing something with Medicare, and so they need some assistance. So we have a series of smaller rooms where you can meet one-on-one and they can work with the people on that. So you want to have that public-private interaction, so equitable access. Sustainable resources, I think in the study, the way you were talking about is more of a funding mechanism so that you always have the funds to run your facility. But when it comes to the building itself, you want to make sure it's sustainable from a building point of view. So you want to have low carbon materials, efficient, sustainable infrastructure systems. We're spending a lot of time in the facilities that we're doing, like the Wayland project right now that we're working on. It's an existing building, but we're tearing it back to the studs. We're ripping off the roof. I'm keeping it back to the trusses and putting in a super insulated exterior envelope, really high insulated windows. So we're trying to get, it's not going to be net zero, but we're trying to get as close as we can so it's a real efficient, sustainable building. So not only do you want it sustainable from a funding point of view, you want it sustainable from a building point of view. Community engagement, you want a building that's open and engaging with the community that people want to come to. You want to have flexible spaces where you can have large groups of people, small groups of people. This is a senior living we did a couple years ago in Hopkinton, Mass. And we added a wing that had 40 new rooms, but the majority of the focus was on the public space. So we created a new salon. We tripled the size of their wellness area. We created a new community space downstairs that's used by the residents. It can also be rented out by people in the community. If someone wanted to have a wedding there, someone wanted to have a community meeting, we have that type of space with its own exterior entrance, so you can open and close that as you need to. We have spaces for art classes. We have a pub lounge down there now. So all these spaces that they didn't have before, we now have them, and they all can be. We have a folding partition here so that this community room can open up into the art space. So sometimes they have art gallery shows that they take the whole place open into. This lounge can open up the doors, and those two spaces can connect. It connects out to a living room space here. So all the spaces, they can either be small and intimate, or they can open up and hold a larger group of people. So I think that's important when you're designing a building. As we go through the study, we'll look to develop those type of spaces. Then exceptional programming, you talked about expansion and reduction, new programming that supports what the town needs. So again, that's creating all these flexible spaces, and we look at either site or a building to do those type of things. We're working on a space right now in Harvard for the senior center in Harvard, and we did actually two studies. We did an initial feasibility study where we looked at their existing building and how to get an addition on it. And it was because it was a historic existing building, and the way it was a wood frame building, we had to separate the addition by 20 feet for a fire separation. The budget got too big, so what they ended up doing is they put out an RFP in the town for existing buildings, for people to submit buildings that people didn't want anymore. And they found an existing building that that met the square footage they needed, that met the parking they needed, and they purchased that building. And then that's the second, so we designed that, and that's just starting construction today. So they took that approach. They looked at both things, either renovation or acquiring a new one. It was an interesting way for them to acquire the new building, but it worked out well for them. And then empowered leadership. Not only do you need to get the staff to run this place, but the building itself needs to be designed so it generates a pride of place for those that work there. If people are there and they're happy working there, they're going to do a better job interacting with your clients and the elderly of Attleboro. They'll have a sense of pride. They'll want to go there every day, and people want to come in and meet with them. So that the building design supports the goals you want to have. Chris, if you could talk about mechanicals.
Sure. So as we were speaking about Harvard, one of the jobs we recently did, one of the bigger concerns coming up nowadays is gas usage. People are trying to move away from gas, go all electric or low carbon. So one of the things we did here was the existing system was furnaces, forced air furnaces with condensing unit air coils. And we were able to completely eliminate gas on the site. We went with a full electric system, VRF, variable refrigerant flow, kind of like package units, split systems, other names for them. But so we went with that, and we went with an ERV for the outside air requirements. And what an ERV is it kind of crosses the air through a heat exchanger, so you reuse some of the existing air. They don't cross path. It's through a heat exchanger, non-contact, and you get some of the heating or cooling you already had for that incoming air. And with that alone, we were able to get enough heating or cooling for that outside air to make sure that the spaces had proper ventilation. And one of the other benefits of this, beyond not having gas on site, is there's a lot of rebates available nowadays, especially to try to push towards this all electric. So there's multiple different rebates currently if you can get rid of gas heating and go towards electric via mass save. So it's definitely something to look into if that was the avenue we went.
So a lot of the projects we're doing now, they're all going to all electric systems. No one wants to use
The
fossil
majority
fuels
of them.
anymore.
Yeah, right.
So we have a lot of experience in designing and coming up with the work for those type of things, so we can incorporate that into the feasibility studies, and whether it's a new building or renovation of an existing building, we can make those systems work.
Not to say that's the only option. If it made more sense to use gas, we'd certainly think about that, but.
So then during the design process, if there is an existing building that you want us to look at, some of the components that we look at, besides the property survey, we do a full ADA analysis of the building, because of course for the clientele that you want to use the building, it's got to be fully accessible, universally designed. So we will do an analysis of that. We go in and do all the existing conditions. We'll look at the systems that are in place for the infrastructure, see if it's worth saving or if it's something you have to replace. So we can include all those things in a building estimate, so that when you, in the report, if it becomes an existing, renovating an existing building versus a new, we compare the costs and the pros and cons of each. We'll look at the program needs that you have and see whether if the square footage of an existing building will work, if it makes more sense for a new building. And then we'll do equipment planning and coordination, because those things you need to make sure everything works once you get into the building. You don't want any surprises. I think we're doing pretty good so far. If you want, we can take you through some experience, or we can stop here and ask questions. These are things that we already had in our proposal, but I can explain them a little more if you want, or it looks like we're about 4 minutes away from our 20 minutes, so.
Well, you can use the 4 minutes for whatever purpose you think is
Okay,
best.
so then this is the first part for the Harvard project we did. Their existing facility is called the Hildreth House, and it's this historic building that's right here. It was an all wood frame structure. So through the course of our study, we found out that we couldn't build onto it, so we needed to separate it by, I think it was 20 feet, and we were proposing a new structure that went beside it that was a big function room. It had a new warming kitchen in it, had some office space, and kind of filled out the facilities. So they were going to renovate the first building to have more of the private meeting rooms and office space, and then use the new building for the bigger public spaces that they would have. Lined it with porches so they had connection to the outdoors. The budget came in, they felt they presented it to town meeting. It did not get approved, so that's when they went back and decided to look at that process that I told you, where they went and looked at an existing building. They put on an RFP just for that. They ended up purchasing this building that was a Harvard Medical, surprised it's the same name, it was a Harvard Medical Clinic. And it was roughly 6,000 square feet, which was the program they were looking for, with I think it's got 90 parking spaces on it. So we were able to take that space, and we went inside, and we kept one side of these were existing exam rooms, so we turned that into offices for the Council on Aging component. We have an IT conference room in the front, a small waiting area when you first come in, and then the large meeting space on the left-hand side. We divide it in two, because they do a lot of, during the week, they do a lot of smaller lunches and then some bigger meetings, so they wanted to be able to separate the space, so we developed this glass wall between them so that you could still see activities that are going on. And then when you have a larger space, you can open everything up and then create one larger space. We are developing a little terrace off the back, so they didn't have any outdoor space before. Put in a new warming kitchen, expanded all the bathrooms, kept the mechanical space, and that's where Chris worked his magic with the new system for the building. We're doing a senior center in the town of Seekonk right now. The existing center was a 6,000 square foot facility that opened up in 2016.
and they were pretty lucky. There was an existing pool supply company, and so they used up roughly half the space in 2016, and then we got hired a couple years ago to expand into the adjacent 6,000 square feet. So the expansion included more activity space. They needed more staff offices. So the key was trying to knit those two together, because the existing building was here, and then the expansion, everything went up a half a level and down half a level. So we put in a small elevator to go up and down, half a level each. We put in a new staircase that opened it up. And so they go down to some nice big public rooms. They go up to some office space and some smaller public rooms. So that's under construction right now. The project that we're knee-deep in right now is in Wayland for their Council on Aging Community Center. This is a combination that's not only, they have a Council on Aging portion here in the green that you see. So you come into the entrance. They have a waiting room. They have their office spaces for meeting with their clients. They have a couple smaller conference rooms and activity rooms. Then for the community side, they have a large meeting space here that could handle close to 100 people for dining, and almost, I think it's 168 for conferences, if they have lectures, things like that. Then they have a series of smaller activity rooms along the back. This one here is going to be for art facilities. It's along the Sudbury River. That's along the back here, so they're going to have some archaeological classes, and then just another activity space that they can use for their town recreation space. So that's an existing building, like I mentioned, but we're carrying it back to the studs and basically building a new building on this. We're even increasing the slab, because the slab is 4 inches below the floodplain, so we need to get that up a little bit. So we're pouring a new slab, we're re-insulating the exterior, re-insulating the roof. And then there's a large attic space up over the top here that Chris is laying out all the mechanicals up in that area.
Electrical will be up there as well to keep it
So
much of the
I
floor.
think we probably have come to the question period.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so kind of two questions blended into one. How do you think about what the senior center's needs are going to be today as opposed to 5 or 10 years from now? How do you go about visioning that? And then how do you think about building adaptability, modularity, that sort of thing into your structures to account for that?
Okay. The first one, the future needs, well, we do a lot of interviewing right now to find out the stuff you need now, and then where you see the growth is. I know there were some things in the community needs assessment that he talked about, things down the road, but we also I think it's more just instinct, the way we work. We know there's going to be public spaces. It's to me, it's getting things in the senior center, and this is always based on the amount of space you have. But as people get older and they move out of their homes into smaller apartments or condominiums, they lose the space that they might have had at one point to do the things they like to do. So to me, a senior center should provide that opportunity. So whether someone wants to paint, whether they want to do woodworking, whether they want to do music, to me, a senior center should accommodate those things for them that they can't do in their homes, and that's what brings them into a senior center and do the activities. So I think we got a plan to do those activities. So we like to plan a building and then make sure there's areas that you can expand it. So if it's a new property we're looking at, we'd want to look at the zoning so that we arrange the building in such a way that there's expansion capability down the road, so you can always expand the building to add more programs as you need them. And
speaking to the mechanical systems, one of the things I mentioned is there's a push to get rid of gas. So that's one thing, we're trying to stay ahead of the curve there. There's also upcoming regulations on, I know this isn't too exciting, but refrigerants and stuff like that. So we're trying to use refrigerants that aren't going to be phased out within the next 2 years. We're also trying to keep simplicity in mind here, so the controls are very simple. We don't want to make it too complicated. Up and down, we have an alarm for high heat, low heat, and CO2 in the larger rooms. Other than that, we want to make it as easy to use as possible. So.
Was there a second part that we missed?
And that
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Generally, do they put solar panels on senior centers?
We're looking at that for the Wayland project. The town has 2 groups that they've done solar with in other parts of the town, so we are looking at that. We've done a structural analysis on whether we can add it to the roof, which we can, and then they're also looking at adding it to the site as well, where they have solar panels over the parking spaces. So
Yeah.
some people don't like the looks of it, but when you park under them, it's nice because you don't have to clean in the wintertime, and then the lighting gets integrated into it, so you don't have the big light poles, parking lot lights that you normally would have. Everything gets integrated into the system, so we are looking at that for the Wayland system. We're looking at adding it kind of in this lot here, because they want to maintain the view of the building, so we're looking at doing covered parking here, and then adding solar panels across the whole roof.
What about generators?
I'm
Are
sorry?
those generators, are those standard?
Well, it depends on what you want to use the building for. What we're going to do here in Wayland is we're going to provide an exterior plug, and if they need if power goes down, they're going to bring over their portable generator and plug it in from their town area, from their town facilities. Because we spent a lot of time whether this needs to be a cooling center or a warming center or an
Well, that's what I was
emergency
thinking
shelter,
of. If there's power out in
Right.
a major part of the city, and it's in the middle of the summer, 100 degrees,
Correct.
what do you do with all the people?
Right. So, I mean, it's a
Especially
it's
the
a cost.
seniors.
You were-
Well, in Harvard, there was an existing that we were able to reuse for some of the more important things like the refrigerator and stuff like that, to make sure, we don't lose all the food if the power goes out, especially if you're hosting events, you don't want to lose all that you had stored in there.
Right.
So
It comes down to being a cost issue and what
Yeah.
else you have in the town. So Wayland
Yeah.
has an emergency shelter at their middle school, so they decided they didn't want to spend the money here. Just have an ability to plug something in if they lose power, like Chris said, they can make sure they save the food, they can keep emergency services running, things like that. So it's a cost analysis that we would do.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, when you described the getting away from gas, and you described, I think it was a heat pump you were talking about.
yeah.
Is there also solar for that? How expensive, what is the comparison between heating with gas and heating with electricity, basically, and cooling with it as well?
Right. So in today's day and age where the prices of gas, it's significantly cheaper. And, the bigger thing about it is it has a better impact. We're not using fossil fuels to fuel the building. It's all electricity. But on the grand scheme of things, it's a little more upfront. But within about a couple of years, you already made your money back, and then it's just additional savings from that point forward. And it's a lot cleaner for the environment, which is the major care right now. But it is cheaper than using gas.
Okay, any other questions from anybody in the
I think
group?
just one more to make sure everyone gets asked the similar things. So how do you think about site selection when we talk about whether it's in kind of a denser urban area or more far-flung, far afield? What are some considerations about site selection between those two? Not that those are the only two options, but some of your thoughts.
Well, I think if it's more of an urban site, I think the parking issue is the one that always comes up, because is the site large enough to handle, the parking needs of it? Or if you can't handle the parking needs, is it on a bus route or is it on some kind of public transportation so that clients can get there to use the facility? Because if they can't get there and use it, they're not going to use it. It's going to be empty. More suburban site or more different area where you have easier access and parking, I think that's a benefit, but then you want to make sure the topography, is fairly flat. You don't want to be contouring things. Well, we made it work at Christopher Heights. That was a site that was severely sloping, but we were able to put parking underneath it, so there are ways you can work with a site if it slopes or if it's flat. But I think between the two, an urban site and more of a, we'll call it suburban site, it's a parking issue, because you usually can't get much parking on an urban site unless you tuck it under the building like we did at Christopher Heights, because the parcel's not big enough, typically. If you can find a big enough parcel, that to me, it's access and parking between the two. We can do a nice building on either property.
I want to thank you for coming in. We appreciate your time. After the next fourth and final candidate comes in, we're going to do some business, and we'll be making a recommendation to the mayor. If you call Jeremy tomorrow, you can find out how you fared.
Oh, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks for your time, everybody. Have a nice night.
Do you want to hang on to that? Do you need it?
You can either email it to me, email it to me.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Waiting for the colleague, they don't start for another 5 minutes, so we'll wait for her and then get started.
Yeah, why don't we take a 5-minute recess?
That's right, just go.
Anybody
You were
who
done
wants to
break.
join
You're not allowed to.
I'm ahead of the game.
at the facilities, they can certainly do that.
Yeah, I got
So I think we are ready to resume. And
Yeah.
the fourth and final candidate is LLB. And so if you would answer the basic question of why should we hire you for this feasibility study. We'll give you about 20 minutes or so to answer that question and anything else you want to present to us. We'll have about 10 minutes for questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having us, and I hope there weren't only 4 proposals, but anyway, save the best for last, I guess. We're really happy to be here. Unfortunately, the team that we have in our proposal was not able to make it. Various reasons, our project manager's father passed away recently, and the 2 principals were unable to come. Suzanne and I are here. Suzanne DeSalvo. I'm Christian Lads. I've been the longest in the firm, so I think I can speak pretty well for the firm. We're definitely a very collaborative team, and we have kind of a mutual sharing of information, so we're all very familiar with what's going on with our firm. Let's get this right here. We're roughly we hover around 30 people. We have a diversity of work, which we feel really helps bring together concepts from one project to the other, and it really helps us wade through issues that might be unusual because we have references from other projects and other project types. So if you look at our website, you'd see the diversity of the work. So again, we hover around 30, and we do a lot of municipal work in Massachusetts and Rhode Island certainly, but we have an office in Worcester as well. So that gives us the ability to do work in different areas. I've been with the firm 37 years. The firm is 85 years old this year. So we've been around for quite a while, and we're not going anywhere. We're working on, my partner and I, Kathy Bartels, are working on a plan to move the firm into the next era. We've named 5 principals. Suzanne is one of them. And Brian, the principal on this project, is also another that we've named. We work mostly in New England. You can see there's the diversity of areas where we work. We recently moved from Providence to Pawtucket and bought and renovated a mill building, and we took the top floor and we leased the rest. It's a nice open space. We like to have all of our clients there. We've got a really big conference room, and we'll have lunch and work through problems. So that's something that we do with all of our clients. Our strengths. We focus on design with the caveat that it has to be practical. We have a very good kind of dose of New England practicality in our efforts. I'm a RISD grad, Suzanne is, Drayton is. We are very concerned with design, so how building materials come together, how the space functions, how can we make it function better for you is paramount in our minds, and I think you'll see probably through this presentation that we focus a lot on programming, because that's where you really get it. If you don't get the programming right, then you're pretty much in trouble. So we really focus on that. Very client specific, of course. We don't have kind of a cookie cutter approach to anything, whether it's programming or design. Everything is very specific to the client. As I mentioned, we have a very collaborative approach, and we like to get together and switch our teams around and have people various project types. Very important to be on time and on budget, and regarding the detailing, of course, that's quite important to us. But also the project management, because we do have a lot of mixing of teams and that sort of thing. Our project managers, we decided to develop in-house essentially kind of a course, like a school for project management. So you need to, in order to be a project manager, you need to, go through that course. And it unifies how clients see us. So when we're working with you, you could have somebody substitute and come in, and they'll be doing the same thing. So we don't have a lot of different ways of doing things, although we like to keep it flexible, and we keep innovating and advancing our firm. That's our main priority, is to keep our firm moving into the future, and technologically as well as design-wise. A lot of our relevant experience, Suzanne is going to talk about Littleton, the needs assessment that really came from the Littleton Town Hall study. She's right now working on the design development, and that's with Drayton, the design development for the Littleton Senior Center. So here are a number of our projects. It's sort of a grab bag in a way, but when you look at Thayer Homestead and Medway, for instance, that project, and if we have time, you'll see that later, is the idea of creating a function space that can serve multiple types of functions. We think when we found that flexibility seems to be the key, because as you know, when you want to go renovate a building, if you've got all these walls, or in structure in the way, then inevitably the buildings get renovated, right? It always seems to happen. So we like to make sure that whatever we're doing in terms of design allows that to continue, and the building can grow with the community. Sustainability is pretty high on our priority list. LEED, if you're familiar with LEED certification, we have a number of, here's some of our LEED projects, but it's a fairly standard thing for us, and we do the LEED aspects. We don't have a consultant for that, so we're pretty entrenched in this. You don't need to do this to have a sustainable project, however. So all of these ideas, these LEED ideas, are embedded in the way we do business and the way we design. So that's the way we'd approach the project. We have a very thorough and strong project team. Our consultants are in the two lines below. You see we have those little boxes are WBE, MBE certified entities. As you can see from at the top, Brian Valentine will be the principal in charge, and Drayton Fair is consulting principal. Now Drayton has been doing mass, and Brian as well. Drayton's sort of an older gentleman, I should say. Maybe he's only a year older than me, but he's been doing mass. He's been doing library work for his entire career, and these are all public projects, as well as town halls, and a variety of other types of projects like that. And Brian has been doing that as well. He's a bit younger, but he's got quite a bit of experience under his belt. We're all architects as well. Jeff Porter's very experienced, and he's right on the ball. There's nothing missed with Jeff, at least so far. He's really on top of things, and we have our own interior design department. So Angela Olson would be heading that up. I will also say that one of the reasons we feel really strong about our abilities is that we have developed in the past 4 years a number of directorships for various areas of the firm. Suzanne is Director of Interiors, Brian is Director of Production. So we do have places and systems in place for your project that are very well developed. What is very important for us is to engage you and the users, whomever you determine needs to be involved with this project. It's so important to bring everyone along and have everyone on board. So, if Drayton were here, you would know how engaged he can get. He says he'll go to the opening of a door. He really loves to, be engaged and speak regarding projects and, all the night meetings and all these things. So, there's no limit to that for us. And of course, the programming, understanding needs of staff and citizens, all the spaces need to be very comprehensive in terms of their design. And of course, schedule and budget are really critical. I mentioned the certified project manager, but both Drayton and Brian are MCCPO certified, which is important. And we really like to get out there and engage with the community. So however you wanted to do this, we would offer suggestions, and we could certainly put these programs together, but and it's up to you. We can suggest ways of reaching out to the community. We do all sorts of we make all sorts of efforts to extend our, whatever we can do to help you, communicate the project and get support. Regarding the design process, on the left side you'll see a program sheet. This can get very dry. On the right side you'll see, tallied up spaces. There are other things regarding the program that we want to make sure we get, how do you want this thing to feel? What is the scale? What is the look? Is it open? Is it very open? Is it closed in certain areas? What are the other intangible, less tangible aspects to programming that you need to address beyond a simple tally of spaces? So this is the kind of thing that we like to look at. And programming also extends to context. You have a bunch of different sites you're contemplating. They will all have a different context. So, we'll definitely depend on context quite a bit in our design because it really does inform how a building can be shaped, not only in the scale, but also perhaps the style. If you look at our website and you look at the work we're showing, we don't have, a signature style. The look of the projects emerges from a process with the group. In the middle, you see a diagram. Now, these are typically, we take the program and we create diagrams that are, and we call them kind of free body diagrams. That's sort of an engineering term, but they are void of context so that we can idealize spaces. Now, once you do that, if you're trying to put those into an existing space, things will probably not be idealized, but we'll get it as close as we can. So first you want to envision what is the ideal. And then from that point, go to diagramming the site. This is a project, the Squash Busters project on Hope Street in Providence for Moses Brown. There were site influences that created this motion, that also created the orientation to the green space that you see there with these very major trees that we were preserving and wrapping the building around. Creation of exterior spaces is as important to us as the building itself. So we don't look at it as, oh, we have to design an object in this. We're looking at it comprehensively, and we're looking at what the exterior spaces can offer. A lot of times that's overlooked, but we focus on that as much as the building, believe it or not. This is a project that's the LGBTQ Center at URI. It's the first freestanding center of its kind, new construction. But if you look at it and you look at the context, you can see that it's designed to feel like it fits in. It's designed to feel like people will be coming home, like they're, it's got that scale to it. So that definitely influenced this project. And they have, but inside, that building on the left is actually a stone-clad building, and it's sort of their major meeting room. So that is kind of an object that is identifiable, and that's what they wanted, to make sure they had that space. So, breaking down the scale like this does help get a fairly large program into a context that's more residential. This is the Thayer Homestead. And so this project, I'm going to show you a few slides. This project is an interior space. We're really trying to create these flexible multi-purpose spaces. And here you'll see a space wrapped around this building. And that red there, it's kind of like a barn-like structure that houses functions that service this space. This is the corner at the LGBTQ Center, and an idea of openness, visibility. These are things that we talk about during programming, and how do you want this building to respond to its context. Cost estimates, very important. When we work on cost estimates, we want to make sure everyone is aware of a project budget versus construction budget. There are a lot of soft costs that need to be factored in, so that's always something that we really make sure that is considered. And certainly, at some point you're going to probably want to promote this, and we can help you with materials to promote the project as well. I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne, who's going to help out a little bit. Suzanne DeSalvo with Littleton. I don't know how we're doing on time. I hope I didn't take up all your time, Suzanne. That's all right.
I'm glad to be here, everyone. Thanks for having us. I think that this project is particularly applicable to what we read you're looking for in the RFP. It's the Littleton town, Littleton in Massachusetts, brought us on because they needed a study of their town hall. You're looking at an image of that here, and it's, as you can see, it's a bunch of boxes sort of stitched together. Additions over time ranging from 1900 to probably 1970. And all of the town services are housed here. So they've got, the town hall, financial, superintendent's office, library, senior center, TV station. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but everyone was underserved. And they needed us to figure out in a way that honestly was to sort of analyze what they had and show it to people to help facilitate discussions about needs. And we were able to do that in a very rigorous process by quantifying the areas of what each department had, speaking with every single person that was a stakeholder and asking them, what do you have? Did we get it right? What do you need? What do you really want? And that process, repeated over and over, it did result in a lot of very, very dry data, but there's something wonderful about dry data, and that allows you to have a conversation without people getting upset. And what emerged from that data was a very, very clear need for a senior center. They were just highly underserved. The spaces that the seniors were using were dark, they were windowless, they were separated, they weren't accessible, they were tiny. And so once that need was identified, they started to say, okay, we know everyone's clamoring for it, they're right, we hear them, but what are we going to do now? Can we reconfigure the space we have to better serve them? So we tested that. We tested, you'll see it says Shattuck Street in the center of the slide. Shattuck Street is their town campus, where you just saw that building. And so we showed them how we might configure the spaces that were needed and wanted in the existing building, because they had just freed up some space by moving their library out. And we found it didn't work. It didn't make sense with the program. There wasn't good oversight. To invest in this building was going to be terribly expensive. And so they said, we've got other places for you to look at. So we looked at 255 Great Road. That was, seemed like a home run at first. It was a bank built in the 80s, had fantastic parking. Everybody loved the parking. But no one liked the location. It was in a part of town that was not walkable, and in the end would have felt very isolating. But even more importantly, we learned through assessment of the building that, well, it seemed new, it wasn't built to last very long, and it was going to need a tremendous amount of investment. It was also really too big for the senior center, so they needed to start thinking about what else was going to go in there, and it just wasn't a good fit. We looked at King Street. That was an old music school. 3 stories, didn't make sense. A big room that had been an auditorium. Could they use it as a program room? Not really, because it didn't work with the kitchen, and again, was going to need so much investment that it didn't make sense to the town. And so what we did is we started exploring the property that they did have. And this is a little bit of an interruption in my flow, but what you can see here is our analysis of program. So from all of these conversations, we ended up with data and spreadsheets, and you can see the more intense colors are needs. The medium shades are proposed, like the growth that they felt made sense. The space they would be using immediately if they possibly could. And the lightest colors were the wants, the hopes and dreams. And so, you know, when we worked collaboratively with the town and the members of the COA and representatives, these kind of diagrams really helped us to tell them, like, you know, each amount of space really results in money. And so you have to start thinking really carefully about what you really do need, like what you can sacrifice, what you can live without, because decision making is hard. So that helped the conversation. This is just a diagram of the existing building color coded to show the different uses and the spaces they have now. But let's move on from here, because in the end, after all this analysis, we tried 2 different locations on their existing property, which is much bigger than you see here. This is just a portion of it. But the original building we were looking at is in the lower left corner. And what came out of the study was that it really made sense for this town to end up with to start working toward a town campus. That long building we showed at the beginning, not all of it will probably be here in 10 years. They're not sure, they're working it out, but it's aging, and they may demo parts of it, but they have all this property, and to start thinking about it as a way to create pedestrian routes that connect the library to the town services to a senior center started to become a very exciting idea. And we tried out 2 different sites because of grading issues, wetland issues. And this is the current plan we're working with now. We're really happy with it because I think it really does balance those wants and needs. And it works well, meaning that you can come in accessibly on the lower level. The front of the building is actually on the lower level. We've situated it right across from the library, so they'd have a nice relationship with each other, made it for easy drop-off and abundant parking. And on the upper level is also walkout. We took advantage of that change in grade so that you can accessibly use a patio on that side. We thought about the position of the sun. We thought about how important it is to be central in a reception area so that you can really see everybody, so everyone feels, everyone's safe, but they don't feel like, they don't feel judged, or so the receptionist can watch people coming in. They can watch people going up the stairs. They can direct people to the multi-purpose space. They can direct people to the offices. They can even see if someone's needing help near the restrooms. But it's all very casual and very low-key, so everyone's just there to have fun. We made sure we had lots of different types of gathering spaces for quiet areas, social areas, breakout areas. And so on the upper level, we have some fitness centers, 2 program rooms, one that's more arts-oriented, one that's more quiet time or socially oriented for teaching classes and things like that. We visited a lot of senior centers in the areas to get a sense of what they're doing, especially the newer ones, to see what they were excited about, learn what was successful and what wasn't. So I don't know how we're doing on time, but I could go on.
I think we probably have reached the 20 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Jeremy, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll ask some of the same things. So as you talked about your color
Yes.
graph there.
Yes.
And so when you think about the future needs and expansion growth, so kind of two parts. One, how do you go about assessing what Council on Aging's needs will be going forward? And then how do you design the space to accommodate those proposed needs? So what built environment stuff do you do to make it modular or expandable?
Right. Well, definitely we do a lot of talking and a lot of listening and a lot of documenting. So we know that your senior population is exploding. You have a big growth there. So we'll see what you have now. I understand that you've tried some satellite programs in other spaces, and I remember, if you build it, they will come. Was something I read in one of the materials.
Can you stand next to my
I'm sorry. So we definitely want to, make sure that we're hearing all the voices and getting the feedback we need. I think we also can learn a lot from comparable communities that have similar size programs or similar populations, and see how their programming and their spaces are now working for them, and if they wish they'd gone bigger, if they're right-sized. Maybe that's really there.
I think the second part of that was how do we go from the program to the actual building? I think I talked a little bit about that with the idealized diagrams. If it's a new building, that can work very well, because you can most likely meet the idealized scale and relationships between the spaces. It's not only the size of the space and what's in it, but it's where is it located adjacent to what. So there are all sorts of overlays of program ideas, like how does the trash work? What about service in and out? You have the kitchen, and how's that going to work? And what side of the building is that on? And so there are all sorts of these layers of program components that need to be factored in terms of designing the building, which I think was what you're getting at, right?
Yeah, just remember that there's a vast audience watching cable TV at home in Attleboro tonight, and so they want to hear your words.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we have to keep you up there.
I didn't realize we were stars tonight.
Yes, you can probably see this on YouTube in the next day. Double ACS TV.
Okay.
So, any other questions, Jeremy?
That's it from me.
Okay, any questions, Ed?
Yeah, you mentioned stairs, and that brought to mind a question. How important are elevators in these types of buildings versus stairs, or in addition to stairs?
Sure. Well, we did spend a lot of time talking about that with this center in particular. At first, the hope was to have everything on a single level, and that does make things easier because elevators do get very expensive. In this case, we just really didn't have the land area to do that. And so we needed to fit the program onto 2 levels, in which case an elevator is really essential. And in this case, by letter of the law, we didn't need to make it a stretcher-compatible elevator, but we made it just a little bit bigger to do that, meaning we could both levels are on grade, so emergency services could come from either level, but we wanted to make sure that it was flexible. And so I would say elevators are very important if you need a second level.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming in. We're going to do some voting after you leave, but if you call Jeremy tomorrow, you can find out how you did.
All right, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also worked on this project.
We are going to have the commission members share their thoughts and rank the candidates 3, 2, 1, 0 for first, second, third, and fourth. But before we do that, I think we'd like to give an opportunity to those who don't get a vote but have an opinion and just hear what they have to say. So, Ty, do you want to share your thoughts?
I was interested in when they, first of all, I was hoping, and I think I only heard one of the presenters talk about the study that we did with UMass. And there was, I think, a lot to learn from that study. And second of all, I was appreciative of two of the presenters taking our park into consideration, and also the possibility of at least looking at the current building in our park and then making a decision based upon that. So those were the 2 points I was looking at the most.
Any of the candidates that stood out above the others to you?
Oh, I get to be the first one to say that.
Sure.
Okay, BH plus.
Okay, very good.
I felt a strong sense of competency.
Yeah, they did our library project.
Which
Joe?
one did he say?
In terms of evaluating them, to me, it seemed that BH Plus knew a lot about Attleboro, had definitely looked at the aging study that had been done. They looked like if they were hired, they could start tomorrow. They seemed to know exactly what they had to do. But I also thought Abacus and Lero were also pretty impressive. It seemed like a lot of capabilities there. But LLB didn't, they were not specific at all in terms of the Attleboro project, so I mean, maybe they could put it together, but that the presentation didn't didn't get into as much detail as the others, as the others did with respect to a new senior center for us, so.
Yeah, I think, if I'm understanding you right, they didn't talk about the process very much. They talked about a project that they had done.
A project they had done.
But not the process.
Right, yeah.
So-
Whereas the others at least had outlined a process. And I think there was another one that also, I think it was Lero also referred to the study.
Yeah.
They did also, yeah.
They also used the strategic plan, which I found very interesting.
And they used the strategic plan, correct, yeah.
Okay.
Which Melissa, by the way, likes to use, and when we have our board meetings, she likes to show progress against that plan, so they're in line too, I think.
Okay. John?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I felt the same way, that the second presenter, BH Plus, seemed to know Attleboro better than the rest did. They seemed to have understood the projections of what the Council on Aging is going to need in the future better. I mean, there was more. The thing is that you can evaluate a presentation on the basis of the way the person has ability to speak, and I think that the person spoke better, had a better ability to make the presentation. I have no idea about the architectural firms, what their ability is to do the job. So I just have to leave that up to you. You've had more experience in that than I have. None, absolutely none. But as far as an empathy for and knowledge of the study that was done by UMass Boston, and we spent a lot of time on that. Some of us did, and trying to. And it was led by the lady who is the director at the library. No, the literacy center, correct?
Mhm.
At the literacy center, yeah.
She did the strategic plan.
Huh?
The woman from the literacy
Yeah,
center
yeah.
did the strategic plan.
Right,
Yes,
that's,
right.
and
Based on the
that's what
aging
I'm saying, that
study.
he seemed to know much more about that than
Yeah.
the others did.
Okay, thank you. Melissa?
Honestly, I really liked the first presenter, Abacus. They kind of hit all the hot spots for me. They talked about partnering with, other agencies in the city, some multi-generational programs. The connection to outdoors was important. Make the rooms as multi-purposeful as possible. It's kind of becoming a joke about the pickleball, but seriously, I mean, if that's what our people want, those are the things we do need to look at. They've also have a tremendous resume with doing a lot of other senior centers across the state. They also talked about food pantries and DME equipment. I mean, obviously, I'm in the field every day, and our DME, the use for those items is increased tremendously, and we need room to store all of that. Supply chain issues, affordability, all of those things. Food needs, obviously, are, expanding our food programs, things like that are very important. BHA, I think they look great on paper. Initially, I really liked them. And I just felt the presentation was more about the look of the building versus the usefulness. They're all very qualified, obviously, but again, the one that stood out to me was Abacus.
Okay, I don't know the people in the back, but if any of you have any thoughts you want to share?
The second presentator, to me, really showed through their conversation that they were targeting the needs of us seniors. To look into projecting for the future, including the young and the old. I feel like I'm kind of in the middle. I want this to happen before I'm gone. I was just very impressed with the second presenter. I just think that they were targeting our needs pretty well in their presentation.
So that would be BH plus A?
BHA.
Okay. Any other thoughts from the rest of the room? So I think there's a fourth person back there, but the podium's in the way.
I am hiding back. Yes, I think the first two presentations were by far the most comprehensive. It's difficult because they are all qualified and they just have entirely different approaches. So clearly the last presenter's approach is much more of a touchy-feely, I'm going to say it's more RISD, right? It's got that feel to it. Whereas the folks from New York are the folks from New York, and that's how they're going to make their presentation. It's corporate and it's big. So I'm listening to what Melissa says because I think that in the end we want somebody who's got a broad vision that matches as closely as possible to the board's COA's vision for how this process should work.
Okay, Jeremy.
Similar comments to folks. I'll keep them brief. I just want to say before I do make my comments, David Pollock, the principal at Abacus, was school committee chair in Brookline when I worked in Brookline. So I knew him previously. Haven't worked with him in years, but just thought I don't have a vote, but thought I should tell you all that. That being said, I think the things that worked well for KBA in the public safety presentation and that we knew them and that they did great work kind of worked opposite for BHA here. Our experiences, I know it's team-based, not necessarily firm-based, but they missed three major things in the library with massive change orders that run up against state guidelines on what we can do with change orders because the scope changed so much. That wasn't all on them, but I feel like a lot of it was, and it kind of colored my interpretation a little bit. I thought Abacus was far and away the best, and I actually appreciated LLB's deep dive into the process of Littleton. They haven't done many Council on Agings, but I appreciated the step-by-step. But I just think both them and Lero have done too few Council on Agings for them to cut their teeth on our project.
Okay. So in order to make it easier, I guess, for Jeremy, the sheet has Terry first.
What?
I know.
On the sheet.
You're up.
Oh, read your number.
So Terry, please share your thoughts and rankings.
I had BH and A as first or 3.
Yeah, you can say either way. Say them first or fourth, and I'll
Jeremy's ranking. And then I had Abacus as second. And then I had Lero is third, and LLB is fourth. I thought I had the same concern as Jeremy about the library, so I'm like, I'm like on the fence about it, because I have that concern. If they did it, are they going to do it to the senior center? So you got to kind of look at past history. Abacus was very good, very, very good, very capable. So.
Okay.
Changed my mind.
Ed?
The one that I really was impressed with was Lero, from a standpoint of knowing what they were doing, looking forward from an engineering standpoint of what the energy picture would look like in the future. I know that they don't build this. They build assisted living for the most part, so I don't think they have much of a chance to be chosen, but I think that they certainly presented an extremely good program. Having said that, I think B&H and Abacus were probably even, and they touched a lot of things. I was particularly impressed with the pillars approach that B&H plus A used. I think that made things kind of simple as far as what we really want the senior center to do for us.
So your ranking was it Lero first?
Yes.
And who?
And B&H.
H and A was second?
Right, and then the Abacus, and then the...
Was third, and LLB fourth.
Yes.
Okay. Jackie?
Okay, my initial thought was BH&A. I definitely like the fact that they were current in their observations of what we have, and it changes so rapidly. Remembering how when in 1990, one floor was fine, and by the year 2000, we had to go back and make the elevator go someplace to the second floor. And now, 20 years later, we're looking at, we need a new place. So I know things change rapidly. So I liked BH&A, although Jeremy's comment about the 3 errors makes me wonder about them. So I kind of moved them, but maybe number 2, but I like them for number 1, but maybe number 2. Abacus, I was very impressed with. I liked Abacus's comments about the mixed generations and being able to bring in the younger people, I mean, like teenagers and the high schoolers. We're talking potentially, and I know we've kind of referred to it in discussion, of utilizing Highland Park at some point, possibly. Highland Park is across the street from the high school, and that's going to have open access to Blue Pride, to the entire bistro area, to the hair salon, to the things that are available down there. So what would be so negative about being able to utilize both back and forth there a little bit? I don't think we need to worry about transportation. I think we can get GATRA to go anywhere we want them to in the city of Attleboro. We're only talking about, if we do talk about Highland Park, we're only talking about someplace that's just a few blocks up the street. Plus there is a 55 and older development right next door to the doorway of the park. So that put Abacus number 1. I liked Abacus number 1, BH&A number 2, and then Lero and LLB they were 0.5 each. I couldn't give them a total 0, but I couldn't give them a 1 either, any more than a 1. I think Christopher Heights has issues. The fact that Christopher Heights was the only thing we heard about from Lero bothered me immensely. I did not particularly care for that fact. And I think the last group wasn't as specific as they could have been on what they want to do.
He did comment on Christopher Heights, though, that they were working with their hands tied behind their back with an extremely small budget.
Oh, yes, I know. But I remember when Judy got out there with the sledgehammer and knocked down the casket building. So, I remember that very well in '98. You may remember that too, Mr.
I do,
Jacoby.
yes. I do.
It was right after her stroke, and she got out there and she knocked it down, or she hit the first blow anyway. And that was the beginning of Christopher Heights. And I know Christopher Heights has had issues since then too, which they have tried to pan off on other people. So.
Okay. Gail, you're next.
I will keep my comments brief because I feel like they've already been said mostly, but I reiterate everything that Melissa said about Abacus. I ranked them first. BH&A, although they have prior experience in the city, I wasn't as impressed with them. They were ranked the second, then Lero and LLB, third and fourth.
Okay. Jerry.
I personally would have no problem with any one of the 4 doing the design. It's not a huge project. They're all more than capable. That being said, I ranked Abacus number 1. They were a smaller firm. They come right out and said that, there was a nice job for them. They were eager to get it. BH&A, they were all right. They did a pretty good job on the library. There's a few issues still ongoing, but I rented BH&A number 2, and number 3 I had Lyro Corp. Number 3. LLB, they were kind of dry. They didn't really touch on the city's issues. They were too busy talking about a job that they had been working on instead of, mentioning our city and the problems that we have.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Jay.
Keep it short and sweet. My first one would be for Abacus. Reason being is as little, I don't want to say dysfunctional as their presentation was, I felt it was actually really nice and honest. They used the local civil engineer, which I think does understand our city better than someone from outside of that. Second choice would be BH Plus, followed by LLB and Lero.
You had Lero last?
Lero last.
Okay, thank you. It always amazes me because, yes, all 4 are probably well qualified, but a couple of people always, in my mind, talk themselves out of it. Lero and LLB, in my mind, talked themselves out of it tonight. And a variety of reasons. So I'm going to say that I had LLB last and Lero third. I'm very torn on the other 2 because I thought that Joel Bargmann's presentation for BH&A was certainly the slicker presentation, and there was a lot of detail, but I also did remember that, and he made the presentation for the library, but then we got Deb Robinson, so I am sure that whoever was here tonight, him, was not the person we would be getting. So that concerns me. It also concerned me a little bit that there were some issues, some things we had to go back and change on the library. So I went back and forth in my mind, and I'm glad to hear what everyone else had to say. So my number one vote will be for Abacus, and my number two will be for BHNA. And so I think, Jeremy, if you add up the points, I think we have a winner.
I think so.
We do. So Abacus, if we total up 3 points for first place and so forth, Abacus has 18, BH Plus has 15, Lero has 7.5 because Jackie split her vote, and LLB has 1.5. So it was close between Abacus and BH Plus on the committee, but Abacus has the most votes.
Okay, so what that means is that a motion would be in order to recommend to the mayor that we engage in contract negotiations with Abacus.
So moved. Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So just so everyone in the vast audience at home, plus those who are here, know what this means, it means that Jeremy will let Abacus know. We will then receive from them a price proposal, because this is value driven by quality rather than by price. If that price proposal is within our budget and we can negotiate a contract with them, then we will enter into a contract with them. In the event that we are unable to reach a contract with them, we then have the right to go to BHNA as the second place finisher. And I don't think that's happened in our experience.
Yeah, so 2 notes on budget. One, we got a $125,000 appropriation from municipal council. So we said in the RFP that our budget was $125,000. So hopefully everyone applying knows that. Second of all, there was an amendment to the Senate budget at the state level. It's going to conference committee now. It has yet to be signed by the governor, which Senator Rebecca Rausch obtained an earmark for $125,000 for a council on aging feasibility study in Attleboro. So we'll be able to access that funding once the budget's finalized on the state level. Go to municipal council, tell them, thank you for funding us, but we are going to use that for something else now. So we'll be able to take that funding and do some other one-time capital in the city, because the state is going to, hopefully, if it passes through conference committee, the state will be picking up the tab for this study.
But the good news is, whether it's state or city funding, the funding is there, so we can negotiate a contract.
Correct.
So I think that the process could take 6 months, it could take 9 months. I'm not sure what time we put in our...
270 days, we put in 9 months.
We put 9 months in the thing. If they're finished sooner, that's fine, but I'd rather take the 9 months and get a result that we're all happy with than rush it by a couple of months. Because in the end, once we have a site and a program and a budget, we still then have to get it funded. So it's probably not what most of you want to hear, but we also know the reality. And from the numbers that I saw on the screen there, it looked like we might be looking at anywhere $6, $8, $10 million for a building. So obviously that's a major expenditure. Obviously we're going to do our best to advocate for it, whatever it may be. So with that said, does anybody have anything else they wish to bring up? No. If not, a motion is in order to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 8:08-ish.
Great job, Janice.